So what is the gastric sleeve, and how does it compare to something like the gastric bypass or the lap band, or even the gastric balloon? So let me just go ahead and tell you. And I'll also tell you why I chose the gastric sleeve surgery over the other options. So yeah, in a nutshell, the gastric sleeve surgery is where they remove 80% of the fundus of your stomach, which greatly restricts the amount of food you can eat and therefore the amount of calories you can eat in a sitting. But it also has a hormonal component because in reducing the size of the fundus of your stomach, they're also reducing most of the largest part of your body that produces ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. So when they take that out, they also take out like literally 80% of the ghrelin in your body, or at least the part of your body that's able to produce that hunger hormone. So you don't feel hunger quite as strongly. You don't feel it as frequently. And when you become full, you feel it immediately. And it becomes kind of an unpleasant experience. So what they do is they leave you with a vertical gastric sleeve that leaves your intestines intact. And it basically reduces the size of your stomach. A typical obese person's stomach can hold about 2 liters worth of material. So it takes it from the size of a 2-liter bottle of Coke to the size of a banana. So obviously it does have a very significant restrictive component, but it does hit you on those two fronts. It's hormonal and restrictive, and because of that, it's very effective. Because it's not a bypass, because it leaves your intestinal tract intact, you don't have the same malabsorptive issues that you have with a gastric bypass, which I'll explain in a little bit more detail in just a moment. And so this is great if you don't want to be stuck in a situation where it leaves you vulnerable to osteoporosis and ailments like that, because there is a significant risk of osteoporosis with the gastric bypass because you have malabsorption issues the rest of your life because your intestines are greatly reduced in size. So you're just not getting enough nutrients from the food that you're eating with a gastric bypass. The same's not true of the vertical gastric sleeve, which is part of the reason why I chose this. Now, different options are better for different people. And for me, my BMI was not high enough to really justify a gastric bypass. My BMI is less than 40. It's like a 35 or something like that, which is still not great. It's still, not healthy. But for me, I wouldn't have even qualified if it weren't for comorbidity. For me, I have chronic back pain issues and a slip disc in my back. I have PCOS, obviously, and I have, thyroid issues and a bunch of other things. I have sleep apnea. So, I have comorbidities that made me a good candidate for this kind of weight loss. I can tell you with all honesty that I'm eating too much regularly, and that's a big contributing factor to how I ended up like this. Also, I have 2 different disorders that make it very difficult for me to lose weight. And not impossible, but difficult. I have hypothyroidism and I have polycystic ovary syndrome. And I don't want to use those as excuses, but I definitely want to say that they make things harder. Again, not impossible, but more challenging. And so I don't think that it's a weakness to say, hey, I need help. I need some assistance here. I've been trying to do this for 30 plus years without much success on my own. I have lost weight. I lose weight like a champ, I've lost probably 600 pounds or more during the course of my life, I've never weighed that much at any given time, but I've, lost a significant amount, anywhere from like 30 to 100 pounds and then gained it all right back. And so I lost my gallbladder already to this. I don't necessarily want to continue that really radical yo-yo cycle. So instead, what I've decided to do is try to figure out what would be the path that would lead me to a permanent, lasting solution. So that way, I don't have to keep putting my body through that. because I'm very interested in losing the weight. I'm just not interested in doing it if I'm just going to regain it over and over and over again. Because for one, that's heartbreaking. And for two, it's very stressful on your body. Like, it's not good for your health to go way up and then way down and way up and way down. I don't want to keep doing that to myself. So anyhow, how does the gastric sleeve differ from like a gastric bypass? Well, a gastric bypass, as I mentioned, is a little bit more radical. They do more to you. So gastric bypass, instead of leaving you with a sleeve, they leave you with a pouch. And the pouch is about 4 to 6 ounces. And it's near the top of your stomach. Take that pouch and they take your intestines and they reroute your intestines up to the pouch. So, I mean, they don't take them out. They're still there, but they're not part of your digestive tract necessarily. So because of that, like, there's a smaller amount of food you can take in. It's very restrictive. I mean, they're leaving you less space than I get with the gastric sleeve. And it's malabsorptive. So you don't have enough. The food matter does not stay in your intestinal tract long enough because your intestines are shortened for your body to get all the nutrients and fat and all that stuff that it would normally get from the food. So that's why it leads to like this lovely thing called dumping syndrome, because if you eat too many carbohydrates or something like that, your body's like, no, and then it flushes you out. So, you know, it has that component as well. You know, your body feels a very harsh penalty almost immediately for eating the wrong things. And there are hormonal components to it that they're only now trying to figure out, because they know that it does affect hormones. Like, for instance, if you undergo a gastric bypass, a lot of people who have diabetes come out of the surgery no longer diabetic. And it's not because they lost weight. It's the surgery itself can actually cure diabetes, can actually cure a lot of things that are hormonally disruptive in your body. But it's very radical, and it's like the nuclear option. And in fact, the gastric sleeve was originally invented as a sort of 2-step process, where instead of doing the whole bypass at once, they would do the sleeve first, and then they would have a secondary surgery that would do the bypass. And they found that a lot of people weren't coming back for the bypass because they were losing so much weight with the sleeve that they didn't need the bypass. So that's why the gastric sleeve surgery is now a standalone procedure, when in fact it was originally intended to be a 2-step process similar to a gastric bypass. So, but I mean, there are people who go in for revisions. There are people who go in and do get the bypass after they've had the sleeve. So, I mean, they still do it occasionally as a 2-step process, but the vast majority of people who have this particular vertical gastric sleeve procedure done do not require it. But yeah, the gastric bypass to me was not an option. My BMI is just not high enough, and I don't think that my health is so dire that I require something like that, because I mean the whole malabsorptive issue was a real deal breaker for me, you know, because it can cause a lot of problems. It can lead to osteoporosis, for instance, and a whole bunch of issues related to malnutrition, and so I don't necessarily want to do that. Another popular option, though it's waning in popularity these days, is the lap band procedure, or the gastric band. And the reason why I didn't really even consider a lap band is because there are lots of complications with the lap band. It requires frequent adjustments, and even though it's an appliance and not to like reroute your organs or anything like that, it's actually very invasive. It's a very invasive surgery that was marketed as something that's not very invasive. They market it as the less invasive, you know, alternative to, you know, something like a gastric sleeve or a gastric bypass, and it's really not, because it requires more frequent adjustments. The incident of complication is higher with a lap band, and you can end up really damaging your stomach with it if you abuse it. On top of that, the other thing that was really a deal breaker for me in terms of deciding which one I wanted to go with was that with a lap band, there's no hormonal component that stops your hunger. You're still hungry. You just can't eat as much. That sounds like hell. That sounds awful. That sounds like the worst thing ever. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be just as hungry and only be able to eat like a couple of bites of something. Like, I basically just don't want to be hungry. You know, I don't want to be hungry. You know, because for me, my issues aren't like head hunger. I don't eat out of impulse or because I'm bored or because I'm depressed. I eat because I'm hungry. Like, I need something to stop that hunger. You know, I've had great success in the past on certain medications like phentermine. I've been on Qsimia, and I lose weight like a champ every time I'm on those. But the thing is, like, I don't want to be on amphetamines for the rest of my life just to keep my weight in check. Because, you know, the minute you stop taking those, the hunger comes back and you eat again. Like, I just want food to no longer be, like, this thing that has such a hold on my life. I basically just want to do other things with my time. I don't want it occupying so much of my brain space. I don't know how many of you have had, like, significant weight problems, but for me it's kind of torturous sometimes because, like I said, I get physiologically hungry. It's not just like an emotional thing. I'm not just thirsty or something. I basically, and I'm not like a carb junkie. I don't just sit there and eat, you know, pasta and rice and bread, you know, because I know that drives hunger. So, you know, I eat a fairly balanced diet. It's just too much. I eat too much. It is what it is. That is what it is. I eat entirely too much and probably too frequently. And I'm hoping that this will help with that. And I mean, along those veins, like, I don't want an appliance in my body that can corrode, that can mess up my organs. Like, I'd rather just and I don't want to have constant readjustments if something slips or if, you know, I need more restriction. I just want it done with, you know, one stop shot, done, you know, and then recover and get on with my life. And that's why this surgery seemed like the best deal. Because, I mean, like, even with the gastric balloon, that's only in you for like a year. And then when they take it out, you're hungry again. Nah. At least what I'll have at the end of the surgery is all mine. And with the exception of a reduction in size of my stomach, everything's going to be exactly the same. You know, they're not rerouting my intestines. They're not adding any weird objects to my body. They're just taking part of my stomach out so I can't eat as much and I don't feel as hungry. And I think that is not a panacea. It's not going to solve the problem in and of itself, but I think it's going to be a great tool that will allow me to do what I've been trying to do for years, which is to just diet and exercise and get this weight off. And it'll allow me to do it in a way that doesn't require me to take a bunch of amphetamines and doesn't require me to, you know, obsess like a crazy person over every stinking bite that goes into my mouth. Basically just want to eat my protein, eat some veg, get on with life. So that is, you know, those surgeries in a nutshell. It's a very broad strokes kind of summary. But hopefully that explains why I chose this particular surgery and why the others just didn't seem like attractive options to me. Now, that's just me. Maybe you're a little different, you know, and if people have like a lot of excess weight that they're trying to get off, you know, I'm trying to get off like 80 pounds. But if you have, you know, 100 pounds or more you're trying to get off, the gastric bypass might actually be a better option. And I've had friends who've had gastric bypass and they are so happy that they did it. Like, they're all happy that they did it. But for me, I think this is the better approach. So thanks for watching, and I will continue to make these journal entries as I think of topics that might be interesting about it. So bye-bye.